Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the party, and I hope that you are all interested in going global faster, more efficiently, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the global content supply chain. My name is Nicola. I'm British, living in the Netherlands, pretty much like all employees at Yonkers. We're all sort of international, living in different countries, speaking various languages. But don't worry, I am not in charge of any of the translation at all. I'm in charge of the marketing. So, I am a B2B tech marketer. I love technology. I have always found it's very good for me to be able to automate a lot of my admin, to speed up, and basically do a lot more through intelligent working, automation, and I love AI and everything that's happening with it. So that's also going to be a focus on today's discussion. I've spent the last 4 years as the Global Marketing Director at Yonkers. And in that time, we have relaunched the Yonkers website. We've also launched the Words Online platform, which allows a lot of SMBs to be able to go on, upload their content, and get it translated directly. And we were the first in the industry to introduce a subscription model for translation services. Last year, we were the 7th fastest growing language service provider, and given the massive competitive nature of our industry, that was quite an achievement. And also that was all through organic growth rather than through acquisition, which also sort of adds to the power of it. Most of that growth was fueled by e-commerce product descriptions. For us, that is our golden content. We love to translate product descriptions and at scale and high volumes. So we have customers where we can translate 1 million words a day for them into, say, 157 languages. So we've got the experience and we really enjoy sort of e-commerce content, also marketing content. But so I'm passionate about technology, but there's guys here next to me who are going to introduce themselves, and they are passionate about going globally faster and more efficiently. So, guys, can you please introduce yourself? John, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everybody. I'm John Muir. I was recently called a seasoned veteran of the e-commerce industry. I don't know if that's a compliment or if it's just said to make me feel old, but it's probably a little bit of both. I've been e-commerce for over 25 years, ever since before e-commerce was even a term. And for the last 10 to 15 years, I've predominantly worked as a consultant, supporting brands with cross-border internationalization, working directly with retailers. And I also provide a lot of consultancy solution with different SaaS technology vendors on how they're going to grow their vendor business and connect them with different retailers. And the third hat I wear is that I co-own a TikTok partner agency, taking brands onto TikTok Shop. So something a little bit shiny and new, and that's been really exciting. So that's me. Thanks, Nikki.
Great. And Kevin, can you also introduce yourself?
Yeah, Nikki. Kevin Ross. Like John, I've been in e-commerce for the best part of my career. I started off as a technology guy writing code, and then for my sins went more into the sort of consultative marketing part of it. Lived and worked with e-commerce companies in Melbourne, Sydney, Tokyo, Shanghai, and in the UK. And a couple of years ago, I bumped into a UK lady and settled down. So I think this is as far west as I go.
I'm glad. It's nice that we're all sort of like world travelers. So let's get started with my favorite topic. So in the last year, the unprecedented pace at which AI technology has taken off and really exploded has transformed the way that e-commerce business has changed and the way that they deliver content in particular. We're now learning new ways to design, to code, to create images, to create videos at speed and at scale, which has just been unprecedented before. Adobe's research last summer showed that 2/3 of the respondents, mainly marketers like myself, said that content is not just going to double, but it's going to grow between 5 and 20 times in the next 2 years. And I can see that myself. If I look at my own content marketing campaigns, how much content is going into my campaign calendar, there is so much more content. So I'd like to ask you guys, in terms of e-commerce and the e-commerce content supply chain, how has AI impacted and disrupted the e-commerce market? So maybe, John, you want to take this one?
Yeah, very good question. Very much on topic. I think everybody and everywhere I go is talking about generative AI and its use. within sort of like product design, product supply chain, and e-commerce ultimately. I think the major advances I've seen over the last couple of years is the amount of companies that are now using it, going all the way back to the original point of product creation. You know, where you've got traditional product design, you know, product manufacturing, the whole complete supply chain. We're seeing major advances in the use of AI in the content supply chain. And that's then coming all the way through to thinking about what's your product type, what's your product descriptions, all those various different components about how you're doing your product listing, where your content's actually sitting. And I think that's sort of coming to the fore now and making its way in through to sort of like marketing support and stuff as well. Sorry guys, I'm a little bit throaty today, a little bit of a cold. So I think in answer to the question, it's fielding its way through every single component, from product design, manufacturing, through to supply chain, delivery, and then internationalization of product.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's not just marketing that benefits from all this generative AI, it's all the other divisions, logistics. There will be other areas that are going to be benefiting from this enormously. And also these supply chains are becoming a lot more complex, especially as companies move to more composable business models. Meaning that they're going to be looking for more agile ways that are AI powered, that they're going to click and connect a lot more. There's going to be a lot more connections and APIs. Gartner even calls for an era that they call continuous everything. And by that, it's basically alluding to a world where consumer engagement, shopping, and customer journeys are always on, near real time, and constantly turning into new content. So with this in mind, maybe Kevin, and the fact that we're now squarely in a global marketplace, can you provide an overview of what a modern content supply chain looks like in the context of content localization, please?
Yeah, sure. I might pick up on the Gartner report that you talked about. That was an interesting report. So they talk about continuous everything. If you unpack that...
Talking like that.
Can you hear me? Is everyone okay?
Better.
Yeah. If you unpack that, I think there are two key areas of that. One is this whole idea of continuous publishing and where AI gets involved in moving content to the consumer faster. And you know, John and I have worked together for the last 15 years or so, and you know, we used to help e-commerce companies look at how to create content that engages customers at each part of the buying cycle. We used to call that the customer journey. Those customer journeys are now extremely tight, and content that you create today has got to engage, educate, entertain, and convert those customers all in a very short time frame. And so a lot of investment from e-commerce companies at the moment is going into how you create this content that is able to do that on platforms like TikTok. On the other side of it, if you think about I think you talked about composable business. That's the other part of this Gartner thing where they talk about continuous everything, is that companies need the agility to be able to actually do that, which is why things like the Mac Alliance exists, to try to have an API-first composable infrastructure that enables this idea of continuous publishing. So what's bringing that to localization? What's that done from a localization perspective? Localization has been seen for a long time as almost a necessary evil, as a cost center, right? Where companies need to invest to get the content that they create into different markets and to be able to engage the consumers in a culturally relevant way, in their own tone of voice, demographically appropriate. And so from what's happened because of the push to continuous localization, this explosion in content, and this idea of agile business models, localization is becoming more of a strategic imperative to enabling that than it is now a cost center. And so a lot more investment is going into now how do you create a very agile, continuous localization capability that enables continuous publishing into multiple markets.
Can I just come back on a point there, Kevin, because you mentioned something very close to my heart when you talked about content production. And these sort of 4 pillars that we talk about, and I speak to lots of companies and talk about these 4 pillars around content now. Excuse me. So everybody's talking about generative AI and how that can give speed and agility to product creation, product design, you know, marketing content, product content that you can sit within different systems. But What I don't want everybody to think about is I can just use AI and I can create everything and then I can launch a product and I can launch it into any market and it's just there and it all works. It's not a complete magic bullet yet, guys. You know, so it can take you to a certain point, but then when you talk about things like content localization, always think about your content, making sure that it ticks those 4 pillar boxes. You know, so the content needs to engage, it needs to entertain, it needs to educate, and most importantly, it needs to convert. And if you get those first 3 pillars right with your content, whether that be a product image, a product description, or more commonly now, a product video, particularly in short form video content, if it ticks all those 3 boxes, you should see the conversion from it. But don't just think because you've created it, it can then just run anywhere and on any system. You've got to think about where is that piece of content actually going to be placed? You know, is it going to be on my .com? Is it going to be on Amazon? Is it going to be on TikTok? You know, and all of these various different sales channels and marketplaces have rule sets themselves. So think about the rule sets and all the places that you're actually placing your product content for selling, and then build your tech ecosystem around that. Yeah?
Yeah, I agree. And then you've got to be able to think about exactly that with all that complexity that is culturally relevant, you know, in the consumer's voice in their own market. And that's where the whole localization piece needs to go.
And the culture bit's incredible, actually. You know, I first went out to Hong Kong in 2012, and I set up a business in Hong Kong where we became a Tmall Platinum partner, trading on Alibaba, working with the Alibaba network, working with like JD Worldwide. And I saw a massive like boom in different technology platforms out there, going back 10 years ago. You know, one of the things that I've seen really emerge strongly over the last 12 months, and I'm quite heavily involved in it, is live stream shopping through TikTok. And more mainstream brands are now coming onto TikTok and doing this aspect of live stream selling. In 2013, I ran a live stream shopping event for 90 minutes for Ted Baker. You know, they were doing it in China as far back as that, and now it's sort of coming here. And live stream shopping across Southeast Asia now is the strongest component in terms of taking your brand international and selling in those markets. But from a content perspective, you can't just basically take the content, dump it into a platform in China and hope that it sells, because it won't have that localization, it won't have that cultural fit.
Yep.
So when Kevin mentions continuous localization, I think that's really, really important to get that right and understand the markets where you're putting your product content into.
Okay, I was just wondering, do you have any examples of that, of any examples of successes or fails? I mean, the success, I think, live stream shopping, being able to have done that a long time ago and using that as influence marketing to leverage interest and gain brand awareness, particularly when entering a new market. Are there also any other examples you have?
In terms of the use of AI, or just in terms of like localization of content?
Go for it.
So I can think of one actual specific example I was reading about, hearing about just recently, where we talk about using AI to improve, not just in terms of improving your product content, but thinking all the way down to like customer management, customer service, pre-sales and post-sales support that you actually need to do. And one of the stories I heard recently, Nikki, and I think I heard it from yourself actually, was IKEA. You know, so IKEA over the last, I think, 18 months have used AI to basically understand everything there is about their product and how it fits into all aspects of interior design. So they've been able to use AI to train their customer service teams and pre-sales teams on all aspects of interior design, to give interior design consultation and then fit the product into it, and then use AI to place the product that you might buy into a designed room and visualization based on a consultative process. These guys are not interior designers, they're just using AI technology to educate the actual customer success team, and I can't remember the results of that now, but...
Yeah, they made $1.4 billion from that. It was a phenomenal success, and I think it's a beautiful application of AI to train up at scale, and I think it just makes their content a lot more sticky, getting people really interested. Once you've seen your own room designed by an interior designer with all of the products in it, you know, what's going to stop you from actually wanting to have everything, just go, well, I just click here and I buy them all. So they've turned, basically, customer service is often seen as a cost center. They've turned that cost center into a revenue generator and a revenue driver. And I think that was very smart use and application of that. So I might use this question to discuss sort of more about the readiness and preparedness for global presence. What advice do you have for organizations looking to streamline their localization product and processes and improve their content supply chain overall?
So I think in terms of streamlining, I think we can come in to talk about tech there. But I think the first thing you think about when you're going global, and what I see is just really understanding that localization aspect. So it's not just about translating some content. Translating content is obviously vital, but don't just use machine translation and stop there. I promise you guys, it doesn't work, right? There has to be a QC process. And I've seen so many brands over the years enter new markets, do translation. They're going to use like Google Translate and say, there we go, we've got our product description, it's ready to go. It's not localized. It's translated by machine. It's not localized. It's not thinking about brand fit. It's not thinking about cultural differences. It's not even necessarily understanding the nuances around certain product. Think about fashion, for example. You know, a waistcoat that we know as a waistcoat in the UK, in Australia it's called a vest. So you can't do your product category listing and your product naming and have basically waistcoats. You have to call them vests. And then we think about a vest, and then you're going to list vests on your product category. In Australia, well, a vest to them is a waistcoat. Our vest, they call it, does anybody know? A singlet.
Singlet.
It's what all the Aussie football players wear. Very, very popular style of dress code. And again, US, you guys will all know this one, trousers, US they're called pants. In the UK, pants are underwear. So just thinking about that kind of look like, and I'm not going to go into the thong thing. Australians wear thongs, we call them flip-flop, you know, we know what thongs are here. But there's that localization.
It can basically go wrong very, very quickly,
it can go wrong
can't
very,
it?
very, very
I
quickly.
knew there's a reason I brought you on stage.
Well, I mean, I've just seen it so many times, you know, and then particularly when you're thinking about, not just in terms of localization of like product naming, but product descriptions, understanding the brand, you know, and AI is working really, really well now in terms of when you do start to use that translation, AI technologies will start to educate the system itself to remember things which are brand fit, you know, localization of product content that fits into that market. And trust me, the Jonkers guys have a solution which is phenomenal for doing all of that. But it's not just about the naming convention. You know, I'll give you an example. The largest supermarket chain in Australia, I remember about 6 years ago now, they launched into China. They launched on Tmall. And they had maybe about 400 different products that sat within their range. And it was all their own range. And I'm not going to name the name of the retailer because that's not fair, right? Because everybody will start talking about them. But one of the products that launched was pistachio nuts. So they had a bag of pistachio nuts. And the product description, when it was converted, didn't take into specific nuances. It was completely misunderstood by the machine translation. So when the product went live on Tmall, it said pistachio nuts, and the slogan underneath it, will make you better at mathematics.
I'm glad that went into a nice clean version. That's
yeah,
good.
Yeah,
That's good.
you know, I can go into some pretty sordid stories around how some of the translations and stuff have come around, but just thinking about content localization is more than just doing a machine translation. You know, you've got to think about brand fit, product fit, cultural difference.
Yeah.
And we can come on to talk about user-generated content and stuff as well.
Yes,
Because that's happening now, you know, and your UGC might be fit for market in this market, but then how do you do localization of UGC in other markets? You know, what Ted Baker do in terms of UGC for UK is completely different to all the UGC that the Commission does to source for them back in 2013 and how that runs now in China or in Singapore or Malaysia and even Australia. So there's so many areas there to think about now, and if any of you guys are running e-commerce businesses, you'll know just how much content you've got to deal with and the various different systems that you've got there, and maybe you can talk, Kevin, a bit more about the systems, the tech ecosystem and that sort of component.
Well, in fact, one of the things, just as you were talking there, and you're talking about all the different types of content, and you were talking about the nuances of taking that content to different markets, one of the things that we do a lot of work on with our clients is around the area of terminology. And so without that, you land up doing some of the things that you've talked about, whether you're using humans or machines. But if you can centralize from a brand perspective, I mean, I've worked with organizations that have a centralized content strategy, but they disseminate that into multiple markets, and then within the market they do localization, and you start to lose that terminology if you haven't got a cohesive way of doing that, or you haven't got a central way of how you want your tone of voice to be. And I've worked with other brands who have silos of, their B2B strategy, their B2C strategy, and each of those create their own content, and then you start to lose brand dimension, if you like. So, and so terminology can be really, really, really important. If you get that piece right, your localization strategy behind that can be a whole lot streamlined, much faster, and it can actually enable a lot of this kind of continuous localization that you're talking about.
So that's good. So normally as marketers, we say that content is king, but in some instances, and particularly when going global, it's like terminology is king, should also be taken into situation. All right, so I think we're just about out of time.
Can I just summarize there, if you don't mind? I think what I kind of want to summarize before we sort of like close off is just to say that the use of AI for content creation is great. The use of machine translation to translate your content for different markets is great. But don't just stop there, guys. Always make sure that there's some form of QC check. And if that QC check is a kind of human QC check, even better. But make sure there's a QC check for making sure the content is right, making sure the content is culturally fit, making sure the content is localized, and making sure there's not glaring mistakes like pistachio nuts will make you better at counting, right? Because it's just simply not true. And you don't want your product making claims which are false, which can happen in the world of translation. So I just wanted to kind of summarize that. It's important to say, use AI as much as you can, do machine translation, but make sure you've got all those QC checks in place.
I think that ties into also ChatGPT users for their data modeling. 80% of that data that has gone into that is English. And so you can generate really great content in English, but it is also generating content for you, which means it's creatively thinking about what it thinks you want it to say. And so that's where hiccups can also take into place if it's not given the proper context. And also, the language models and stuff are there for a reason. They cost eye-watering amounts of money to create DeepL, Google Translate. They are fit for purpose in terms of translation. But at the moment, I think our point of view is that it's still, you need a pair of human eyes to go over it and look at it and to review that content, and also to take into account the terminology, the data that you have, so that we can still leverage you and get to go to market globally. So one other thing that both of you have mentioned that I also really liked was that e-commerce content needs us to engage, entertain, educate, and convert. And basically missing out on one of those points is going to be a key set of, is going to be a chance of failure. So make sure that you include that in all of your languages. Thank you very much, guys. Are there any questions? And if not, that's it from us. And we are over at C29, which is basically straight ahead that way towards the other theatres. Come and talk to us. We've got chocolates on the stand, and we can speak to you later.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, guys.